four cores of credibility: integrity and intent that flow from your character, capabilities and results that flow from your competence. Combined, that's your credibility. And that's the foundation on which all trust is built. And so those behaviors, they work really well. They'll build trust exceptionally fast if you're built on the foundation of credibility first. And you can't fake the credibility.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Our guest for this episode of Leadership is my longtime friend, Stephen M.R. Covey. He's the New York Times and #1 Wall Street Journal best-selling author of two of my favorite books, The Speed of Trust and Trust and Inspire. With a Harvard MBA, Stephen was CEO of the Covey Leadership Center, which, under his stewardship, became the world's largest leadership development firm. He then helped orchestrate a merger with Franklin Quest to create Franklin Covey, which today is the gold standard in the personal development business. Stephen, welcome to Leadership.
Hey, it's so great to be with you, Roger. I'm very excited for our conversation.
Well, thank you. Now, for our listeners, let me tee up our discussion. Trust is the operating system of every relationship. Think about that metaphor, operating system. You can have great software programs installed on your computer, but if your computer's operating system has a glitch, nothing seems to work right. In your work environment, you can have world-class processes in place, backed up by well-conceived procedures. But if trust is fragile, you can never achieve consistently good results. In personal relationships, trust is always the key. It's possible to like and even love someone, but if strong trust is not part of the relationship, it can never reach its full potential. Honesty, of course, is a component of trust, yet some people can be basically honest, but simply unreliable. Reliability is also a matter of trust. Stephen, you are a champion of the idea that in addition to being a character trait, trust is a competency, an actual skill that can be cultivated and improved. Why is that paradigm so challenging for some people to grasp?
I think it's because we've traditionally just come at it as trust being something that you either have or you don't. Kind of like it's either there or it's not. And I've seen situations where people just say, hey, there's just low trust in this relationship or low trust on our team and the culture, as if it's just a given and we can't do anything about it. So I think that's the common approach, that you either have it or you don't. And so if you really think about it, though, in the same way that you can behave your way out of trust and lose it, you can also behave your way into trust and to create it and grow it. And so a big part of the work that I've done is really that paradigm shift of saying to people, trust is a learnable skill. Trust is a competency, something we can create and grow and establish on purpose. We can build trust intentionally. And that's it's really exciting because you can walk into a situation where there's lower trust and intentionally build high trust. And knowing that, and knowing that this is a competency that's learnable is very liberating for people and gives you an advantage to say, hey, what if I had the skill, the ability to create trust in any and all relationships? So that's the idea. And I think that we're shifting from an old school paradigm of you either have it or you don't. That's the starting point for most people.
Well, I hope we're making that shift. What do you see as some of the specific behaviors that can be taught to people and emphasized in an organization's performance culture?
Well, in Speed of Trust, I identified 13 very specific behaviors that are disproportionately valuable in building trust or in destroying trust if you do the opposite or the counterfeit of those behaviors. And they're really common sense things that most people kind of get. It's just that we've got to make sure we do them. So it's behaviors such as talking straight, as opposed to spinning or twisting and manipulating. Creating transparency is another very important behavior that builds trust, and learning how to be transparent and to declare your intent and things like that. Behaviors like confronting reality, where you take things head on, even the tough things. And it's so easy to want to kind of skirt reality or kick the can down the road, avoid it, as opposed to really taking it head on. And then behaviors such as clarifying expectations, getting really good at that. And then practicing accountability to those expectations. And when you do those two behaviors in combination, clarifying expectations, practicing accountability, that enables you to be able to extend trust to people because there's clear expectations and accountability. I'll just highlight a couple more. Listen first. That's a key behavior to building trust. And most people don't listen with the intent to really understand. They rather listen with the intent to merely reply. But when you really achieve understanding, that builds trust. Maybe the biggest of them all is to keep commitments. It's really the fastest way to build trust in any relationship. Make a commitment to someone and then keep it. Make another commitment, keep it. Repeat that process. Make, keep, repeat. Make, keep, repeat. You can build trust fast. So these are all very practical, tangible behaviors, things people can do to build trust intentionally. Maybe I'll give you the last one I'll mention, extend trust. And that's the idea that you got to give trust to get trust. You got to extend it to receive it, because when you give trust to people, they tend to reciprocate and return that trust back to you. Whereas when you don't trust people, they tend to not trust you either. So there's very practical, tangible behaviors we can get good at. I've identified 13. I highlighted maybe 8 or 9 of them right here, but they're things you can do and get good at doing in order to intentionally build trust.
Well, some people can be very good at learning behaviors, even exhibiting certain behaviors. Is it possible, do you think, to fake trust? For example, what if a smart guy goes through a workshop and says to himself, okay, if that's what it's going to take for people to trust me, I'll just pretend with these behaviors. How does that work?
Yeah. In the long run, no, you can't fake it. You might get away with it in the short run. Especially like you say, a smart person might fake it for a while, but they can't sustain it, because ultimately, one's true character will come out. It will be manifest. And if you're not trustworthy at some point, that lack of integrity, the lack of character, or the self-serving nature of an approach will come out. Or if someone is not, doesn't have the competency to sustain their trust, or not reliable, they don't deliver, it will come out. So maybe you could fake it for a while, but you can't sustain it. And that's why I really kind of say that in addition to those behaviors, which help you build trust, someone might look at that and say, a smart person might say, hey, all right, I'll just kind of go through the motions on these behaviors and that will help me build trust. Well, it doesn't quite work like that, because there's a foundation that precedes the behaviors, and that's your credibility. And credibility comes out of your character and your competence. And your character is your integrity and your intent. Integrity, am I congruent? Intent, what's my agenda? Am I seeking mutual benefit? Win-win. That's your character. And you can't fake that in the long run. Your competence comes out of, you look at, well, what are my capabilities, my talents, my skills? Am I current? Am I relevant? Is the key question there. Am I relevant? And in a changing world, that's so important to stay relevant. But then also, kind of, what's my track record of results? Does my past performance, my track record of delivering, performing, give people confidence that they can trust me? So I just named 4 cores of credibility: integrity and intent that flow from your character, capabilities and results that flow from your competence. Combined, that's your credibility. And that's the foundation on which all trust is built. And so those behaviors, they work really well. They'll build trust exceptionally fast if you're built on the foundation of credibility first, and you can't fake the credibility. Whereas if someone were to try to just do the behaviors, but they don't have a foundation of credibility, they're not a person of integrity, they're just not really seeking mutual benefit in their intent, they're just self-serving, in the long run, what will happen is that lack of character will be manifest, and you'll actually find that maybe you'll lose trust faster than ever before because you were faking it. It wasn't authentic. It wasn't real. And so the behavior alone is not just a technique. And without the credibility, the behavior is just a technique. But with the credibility as the foundation, the behaviors are great accelerators to building trust.
Yes, exactly. Well, trust is clearly much more than merely a social virtue. Tell us, if you will, about the business case for trust.
Yeah, this is exciting that, most people think, hey, well, yeah, trust is important and they know it's a social virtue and that it matters, but they've often not thought of it in terms of economics, in terms of the business case or advantage of trust. And so I make this point that trust always impacts 2 measurable outcomes, always. And these are speed and cost. And this is really the economics of trust. And there's a simple formula that looks like this. When the trust goes down in any relationship or on a team or in a company or in the marketplace with customers or partners, when the trust goes down in any and every relationship, here's what you will find. Speed will go down with it. Everything is going to take you longer to do. And cost will go up. Everything will cost you more to do, a lot more. Our distrust is very expensive. And so that simple formula plays out everywhere. I mean, just think of a low trust relationship you might have. My guess is it takes you longer, costs you more to get anything done. Think of maybe teams you might have been on in the past where, for whatever reason, there was low trust on the team. How everything takes longer, everything costs more. I call that a tax, a low trust tax, and it's a wasted tax. So that's the bad news. Low trust is a tax. The good news is that the converse is true, and that high trust is a dividend. And here's how that formula works. When the trust goes up in a relationship or on a team, in a company, in a culture, in the marketplace, with customers, partners, in any relationship, when the trust goes up, here's what you're going to find. The speed goes up with it. Now you can do everything faster, a whole lot faster, and the cost comes down. It costs you less. You can move exceptionally fast, lower cost. Now that is a dividend, a high trust dividend. And Roger, it's really that simple, that powerful, that predictable. And you want examples of the dividend? Just think of having a high trust relationship. Think of someone you work with that you trust. My guess is you move fast as you work together, low cost. Think of when you built a high trust team, high trust culture. You can move fast. You see, speed happens when people trust each other. And nothing is as fast as the speed of trust. Nothing is as profitable as the economics of trust.
Yes, excellent. Well, Stephen, in my observation, people who are most effective are effective not by virtue of their titles or tenure or gender or any other demographic, but rather because of their behaviors, and you've talked about that. And many of these people are really good at being explicit about trust issues. I believe you call that building trust on purpose. I think you just used that phrase. I've heard you illustrate that with a story about the early days at Hewlett-Packard. Tell us what happened there.
Yeah, this is, this was, decades ago. It was when Bill Hewlett and David Packard founded their company. And David Packard had been in a company prior where it always bothered him that they had, they had storage bins where the engineers could get tools that they would use at the time. Again, this is old tech. and so there would be storage bins that had tools for people to use. But the company locked them up. They overzealously protected them. And so when David Packard and Bill Hewlett formed their own company, Hewlett-Packard, they wanted to start with trust because they had this, David Packard in particular had this bad experience of not feeling trusted at his old company, and the locked storage bins became a symbol of that. So they started their own company and they had open storage bins. But then, some time passed and one time over a weekend, Bill Hewlett went into the company and he found that the storage bins had locks on them. Someone had put locks on, even though, they didn't set it up this way. And it was probably because maybe something got stolen or something, but he was just profoundly disappointed. And so what he did was, with great fanfare, he literally got a saw and he came up to the lock and he sawed it off and broke it open, threw it on the ground, opened the bin, and then he put a sign up that said, HP trusts its employees. And it was a statement of saying, look, these open storage bins, it's a symbol of the trust that we have in our people. And they'd rather lose a tool or two from someone that was untrustworthy, that would be, a rare event versus showing distrust towards everyone by locking the bins. And so it was it became a symbol of trust. And every time everyone would see these open storage bins, that anyone could come in and take tools, and some of these could be expensive tools, they could just take it because they were trusted. And that became a great symbol of trust. And back in the day, that, HP was considered one of the high trust companies in the world. And I think it's because Bill Hewlett and David Packard were so convinced that this was the foundation of the kind of company they wanted to build, and the open storage bins became a symbol of that trust.
Now, I can imagine the conversation of the employees when they came in and saw that sign.
Absolutely.
And here it is decades later, and you and others are still telling that story. So that was a very powerful thing they did. Very smart.
Absolutely. That's the power of great, symbols, is that they're disproportionate in their value. And they linger and they carry on. They have a legacy to them.
They do.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
Stephen, in your groundbreaking bestseller, The Speed of Trust, you focused on trust as a noun. Now, in your follow-up bestseller, Trust and Inspire, you show the value of trust as a verb. I think it's a distinction and combination well worth pondering. So, in a nutshell, What's the primary advantage of trust and inspire leadership over command and control leadership?
I would say this, in a nutshell, it's going to be relevance. Trust and inspire is so relevant for our world today, whereas command and control, kind of the old model of leadership, is more the traditional approach, hierarchical approach, top-down approach. That might have been helpful and useful in its time, in its day. And, think of the scientific management, Frederick Winslow Taylor, and, kind of bringing efficiency into play. But it was a different world back then. And you look at our world today, where that's characterized by change and by disruption. And we have all these new technologies, generative AI, all these things that are happening to us. So there's so much, the very nature of the world is changing, but also the nature of the workplace is changing, where suddenly there's remote and hybrid work options that didn't exist even a few years ago. And the nature of the workforce is changing. We've always had multiple generations at work, but the expectations today, especially with the younger generations, are just so different than the older generations in terms of how they want to be engaged and led. And I could go on and on and on of just how it's a different world that we're operating in today. And people have choices and options in a way they didn't have before. And all of these changes have put a premium on really a couple of key things that need to happen. And I call these the two epic imperatives of our time. And here's the first. It's the need to create a high trust culture. Why? So we can attract, retain, engage, and inspire the best people and bring out the best in people. Unleash the capability and the talent that's inside of people. So a high trust culture that inspires will be a huge advantage for any organization that wants to win the war for talent, which we all have today, because I just read a CEO article today that says it's the number one priority of CEOs, attracting and retaining talent. And nothing attracts talent like trust, like the HP example we just shared. So that's vital. And the second imperative that's vital in this changing, disruptive world is the need to constantly collaborate and innovate so that we stay relevant in this disruptive world. Otherwise, we're going to fall behind. If we're not collaborating and innovating, we're going to fall behind. Everything's changing too fast. Well, here's the point. The old way of leading, command and control, is not going to produce those two outcomes for those imperatives. Put another way, you can't command and control your way to a high trust culture that inspires. No one's going to feel inspired when they're just told what to do and, top down dictatorial type management. No one's inspired by that. They don't feel trusted. That won't inspire anyone. You want to attract the talent. But also, you can't command and control your way to collaboration and innovation. It's just not relevant. Instead, rather than command and control, I call the new way of leading, in contrast to that, I call it trust and inspire, in contrast to command and control. It's a way of leading where I manage things, but I lead people. And I'm efficient with things, but I'm effective with people. I'm not just trying to motivate through carrot and stick only. Yes, that's part of it, but I'm trying to inspire people by connecting with them through their heart and then connecting people to purpose and to meaning and to contribution, helping them grow and develop, tapping into what's inside of them so that I inspire, not just motivate. And so when we're a trust and inspire leader instead of a command and control leader, that's how we're going to win that war for talent. And it's how we're going to collaborate and innovate so we stay relevant. So if I could say in one word, why is this so vital? It's relevance. And the other word I would say, it's how we're going to unleash talent and unleash the capabilities that's inside of people. And we need to tap into that today more than ever before.
Well, I can see how a leader practicing these kinds of behaviors would certainly help address the quiet quitting that we see in a lot of organizations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When quiet quitting can happen and disengagement of people, or when they quit, but they stay, right? That's another way of saying quiet quitting.
That's even
they
more.
Quit, but stay.
Yeah, that's more expensive than quitting and leaving.
Absolutely, because you don't even know. But we're not tapping into our, too often the people's performance is nowhere near their potential. That's a leadership challenge. And how we lead matters. And we need to lead in a way that taps into that potential, that talent, that greatness that's inside of people and unleashes it for the benefit of the organization as well as for the growth of the person, both.
Right. To piggyback a bit on what you've just said, in discussing leadership competencies, I've heard you cite a study that shows the ability to inspire to high performance to be the number one predictor of being seen as an extraordinary leader. So what does that say about connecting with people and connecting to purpose?
It says an enormous amount of how vital that is, because if the number one competency that people want to see from their leader is a leader who inspires me and inspires those about, them, then that's what people want to see. Then that's also saying that we've got to learn how to inspire. And sometimes when people think about inspiring others, they think, well, you got to be charismatic to inspire. Hey, and that's just not me. I'm not charismatic. But you know what? They're different things. Charisma and inspiration. I know some people who are charismatic, but who are not inspiring. I know others who no one would describe as charismatic, but who are extraordinarily inspiring because of who they are, because of how they lead, because of how they connect with people through a sense of caring and belonging, and how they connect people to purpose and to meaning and to contribution, which inspires others. And so inspiring others is actually a learnable skill. Everyone can inspire. And the way to inspire, you described in a nutshell there. Connect with people through a sense of caring and belonging, because people feel that, and then connect to purpose, to meaning and contribution. People want to have meaning in their life. They want to have purpose. They want to have significance. They want to matter. They want to leave a legacy. Tap into that. That can inspire. And so we can learn to get good at this as a leader. And suddenly we've taken the idea of inspiring others, we've turned that also into a leadership competency that is vital for us as leaders to get good at today.
Yes. So for both parties in a stewardship agreement, and clearly stewardship agreements are critical in the relationship between leaders and the people on their team, you rightly point out that a stewardship agreement doesn't guarantee that things will always go as planned. So what do you do when someone lets you down?
Well, if you set up the agreement well up front with clear expectations and accountability as part of it, when someone lets you down, ideally you'd go back to the agreement. And the agreement would kind of outline how we're going to be accountable on this, and if we're not, the things we do to take next steps. So I'll make a long story short on this. It's when my father, Dr. Stephen R. Covey, who you knew quite well back in the day, right, Roger, when he wrote his seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and in it he tells the story of green and clean, how he was teaching his young 7-year-old son how to take care of the yard, the lawn, and I was that 7-year-old kid, and it's really a great example of a stewardship agreement, including me letting him down and not doing it at first. But, again, the long story made short is that over a 2-week period, he trained me how to take care of the lawn. And he said, I want the yard to be green and clean. Now, this sounds easy today, but back then, we didn't have automatic sprinklers, so we had to manually do it. We had, big lawns. So he taught me how to do it, what green looked like. He taught me what clean looked like. Again, I'm a 7-year-old boy. He trained me, but then he said, let's have a process for accountability on this. And every week, let's walk around the yard and you tell me how it's going. Again, I'm 7 years old. So he empowered me with, here's the outcome we want, green and clean. And every week we'll walk the yard. You tell me how it's going. So he turns it over to me after 2 weeks of training. And Roger, I did nothing for the next 4 or 5 days. Honestly, I was a 7-year-old kid. I was just playing, and he turned it over to me, and I forgot, and I procrastinated. I didn't do anything. I didn't turn on the sprinklers. This was the middle of the summer. It was scorching hot. The lawn was turning yellow by the day, even by the hour towards the end there. And we had a big neighborhood barbecue over the weekend, and there was garbage everywhere. The lawn was anything but green and clean. It'd been like 5 days. And my dad was kind of tempted to just give up on me, thinking he's too young. He's 7, he's too young. But instead, he went, so I was letting him down, which was your question. What do you do when someone doesn't do it? Here's what my dad did. He went back to the agreement and he said, hey, son, how's it going in the yard? And I kind of just said, oh, fine, Dad, and trying to avoid it. But then he said, hey, remember, we agreed that we'd walk the yard every week and you tell me how it's going. Why don't we do that? So we did. We started to walk the yard and I saw this yard is not green, it's yellow. And it's not clean, it's messy. There's garbage everywhere. And then I kind of broke down and started to cry. And I said, Dad, this is just so hard. And he said, well, what's hard, son? You haven't done anything yet. And I said, well, what was hard in this case, Roger, was me learning to take responsibility. But when he kind of went back to the agreement and we walked around, I realized I'm not doing this yet. And this is my job. And he said, remember, I told you that I would help you if I have time. I said, well, Dad, do you have time? He said, I've got time. I said, could you wait right here? And I ran into the house. I came out with 2 garbage sacks. I took one of them and I gave one to my dad. Then I began to direct him and said, Dad, would you go over and pick up that garbage? Because it kind of makes me want to vomit. Would you pick it up? He said, I'm your helper. I'll do whatever you say. It was at that moment I realized, this is my job. I own this. I'm responsible. Look, my dad is taking my lead. I'm telling him what to do. I'm telling him, and he's doing what I'm asking him to do. And I began to take responsibility. But he went back to the agreement, and the agreement governed. So it wasn't him hovering over me, micromanaging me. Instead, he built the agreement together. He went back to the agreement. I realized I'm not doing this. And I began to take responsibility and to own it. And so it was just a matter of working with them. And, so here's the end of it is that from that day forward, he never had to ask about it again. I took care of that yard and it was green and it was clean, not only for that summer, but for the next decade that followed. And he never once even had to check in on me because I just took responsibility. He treated me according to my potential, not my behavior. And I lived up to it and I became it. And it was done through this stewardship agreement, this empowerment that he gave me and that ultimately brought out the best in me. So it's kind of a fun little illustration of really trust and inspire leadership in action, of a stewardship agreement in action, and how if you build it right, that it's right there. The answers are right there in the agreement yourself. Let the agreement govern as opposed to the boss coming in and micromanaging.
That's a classic story, and one of the wonderful things about it in my mind is its simplicity. You must have that agreement up front at the beginning. If somebody fails to satisfy your expectations down the line and you have not had that discussion, both of you are in a bad place. You need to have that up front.
Absolutely. If you don't do it up front, what happens is it feels later that either you're moving the goalposts on them because, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. The expectations weren't clear. That feels like you're moving the goalposts on them, or they're feeling that like you're being arbitrary and that you're micromanaging them. And hey, I thought you trusted me, and now you're micromanaging me and hovering over me, and they don't like, and it doesn't feel good. And so, but if you do it up front, and also I'd say this, build the agreement together as opposed to dictate the agreement.
Yes.
See, a command and control leader just dictates the agreement. All right, here's what results you need to get, and here's how I'm going to hold you accountable. They might have the right to do that, but that's not very effective because you're not involving the person. If there's more involvement, there'll always be more commitment. And we want people to be more committed. And so by involving them, by building the agreement together, that's what a trust and inspire leader does. They build the agreement together with the other person. Let's discuss, or let's clarify expectations together around the desired results, green and clean. The guidelines. You can't paint the lawn to become green and clean.
Right.
and the resources. I'm your helper. Do you need other helpers? And then let's agree to accountability. What if we were to walk the yard every week? Does that seem good to you? So he involved me in it. Then I felt committed to it. And so you do it up front. You do it together. You build the agreement together. Then there's power in that. Then as a leader, you can truly empower other people, trust them. They feel empowered. They feel trusted, and that inspires them. But you still haven't lost control because there's control that's now built into the agreement. But it enables you to kind of let people do their thing, report back on it, as opposed to you feeling like, oh gosh, I gotta kind of ride on top of, be right on top of them, micromanage them, because I don't want to lose control. No, you built the control through the agreement. So it's a simple approach. And, my dad's main purpose was to raise the child. But guess what? He also got a green and clean lawn to boot.
Yeah,
he got the result as well as he grew the kid.
Well, this reminds me of Will Rogers' famous quote, "Common sense ain't all that common."
Common sense ain't right. I love it. It's not common practice.
Right. A lot of parents just don't follow that, and it's too bad. Let me shift gears a little bit. What are a couple of the most common reasons that people give for resisting adoption of trust and inspired leadership, and how do you calm their concerns? What are some of those concerns?
It's a great question, Roger. Here's one of them. Hey, this sounds good, Stephen, but this won't work here. Not in our company.
Right.
We're a command and control company. Not with my boss. I got a command and control boss, or not in our industry. We're heavy compliance or what have you. So very much that the problem is out there, that this won't work here. That's one. And to that, I just say, well, it may be that you're swimming upstream in certain industries or companies, but if you first model what it looks like, even if it's just with you and your team, then you being a model of trust and inspire, where you get results, but you're also doing it in a way that's growing people and inspiring trust, and your engagement scores are high and you're performing. You being such a model, you then can become a mentor, and you can ripple out from wherever you stand, like a ripple effect metaphor. So I acknowledge there's some contexts and situations where it might be more difficult, where you're really kind of swimming upstream, so to speak, but you can still be a model of what trust and inspire looks like and let that ripple out from there. Here's another one, is that someone might say, well, this sounds like soft leadership. This doesn't sound weak and strong. A leader needs to be strong, and this sounds soft and weak. Well, to that I would argue, actually, this is actually quite strong. because you don't have low expectations, you have high expectations of people, and they're clear. And there's also high accountability to those expectations. And a combination of high expectations with high accountability, that is strong leadership. It's just that the trust and inspire leader, they can be strong without being forceful. They can be authoritative without being authoritarian. They can be, a trust and inspire leader can be decisive without being autocratic. They can still involve people to get greater commitment. And they can be detail-oriented without being distrusting. And again, if you build the agreement together, you can have the important things in that. And so it's really, trust and inspire is really a third alternative. It's not command and control, which is excessively hands-on, but it's also not excessively hands-off, which would be, abdicate and abandon.
Right, laissez-faire.
Laissez-faire. Instead, it's hand in hand. It's with. We're doing this with each other. We're doing this together. It's like Alan Mulally, the former CEO of Ford, and his whole approach to leadership, he called working together. It's together. It's with each other. We're not doing it to someone or even for someone, which is transactional, but with others.
Well, I look back at a lot of the leaders I've had the privilege of working with, and occasionally, not as often as I would have liked, but occasionally I would work with some who practice some of these principles. I wish more people had had the benefit of your book, but back in the day, your book wasn't written yet. But these principles certainly work. I know they work. Let me ask this. You've talked about the family atmosphere in your home growing up with your father. Let me ask, how do some of these principles around trust and inspire apply to a marriage relationship? How can a married couple take advantage of some of these principles?
I think that actually the greatest application of these principles is in our personal relationships. I mean, my focus has been first to go up about this professionally, and because that's the great need that people are saying, how do we navigate this new world that we're in and that. And so I've focused on that. But in the process of doing that, I give so many personal examples and stories and family examples and stories, much like my father did. The green and clean is a personal family example, and yet it's relevant. It's simple, but its relevance in business and in any organizational setting is profound. It's a similar thing. Trust and inspire is a great, relevant way to lead, to build high-trust cultures that inspire people, so we attract talent, but also to collaborate and innovate so we stay relevant. So it's great for that, but I still think its greatest application is one-on-one in the personal relationships, in the family relationships, in a spousal relationship or a partner relationship that no one wants to feel controlled by another. No one wants to feel managed by their partner, their spouse. And, if they feel you're trying to manage them, that's not going to work. That's not a partnership. That doesn't feel 50-50, you're not together as equals. So to try to control another, you can't control another, and you can only control yourself. And you can try to influence another, but you got to model it yourself. You got to go first. And so I think trust and inspire is the best way to work together in a marriage. I think trust and inspire is the best way to lead as a parent, to see the greatness inside of your kids and try to help them come to see it in themselves and to bring it out of them, as opposed to just tell them what to do. That works fine when you're there, but what happens when you're not there?
Right.
And have they built in them? Have they grown and developed? So I think this is maybe the greatest application of trust and inspire is in our personal relationships, in our family relationships, because that matters the most to each of us. And I think that's where the greatest impact is.
Yes.
And Green and Clean is just kind of a clear illustration of that. But clearly, in a spousal or partner relationship, that's the only way to approach it. It's with each other.
Yes. Yes. Well, finally, Stephen, what question do you wish I had asked but didn't? And how would you respond?
All right. Well, you actually, I'll do two parts on this. Here's the first part. This one you did mention, and I just want to give one illustration of it, that you mentioned the importance of connecting with people and then connecting to purpose in order to inspire people. What I want to just add to that on the connecting to purpose is this idea that since people want purpose and meaning in their lives, I believe this, that you can create and embed purpose, meaning, and contribution into almost any role, into almost any organization. So I go back to an illustration. This takes us back centuries or decades, but the space race back in the 60s, and John F. Kennedy comes out and says, we're going to put a man on the moon and return him home safely by the end of the decade. Huge purpose. A year or so later, he's in a NASA site walking through, and President Kennedy comes across a janitor, and he asks the janitor, what do you do here? And the janitor replies, I'm working to put a man on the moon and returning him home safe by the end of the decade. The water had gotten to the end of the row. The janitor had that purpose in them. And it was real, and it inspired him, inspired everyone, inspired the country. I was recently with Pepperdine University and their Graziato School of Business. And they had a purpose before that said this. Their purpose was, our purpose is to produce leaders who are best in the world. That's a good purpose. But then they changed one word and inspired everyone. They said, no, our purpose is not just to produce leaders who are best in the world. Our purpose is to produce leaders who are best for the world. Best for the world leaders. Not just in the world, but best for the world. Everyone was inspired, from the professors to the staff members to the janitors, because you can tap into that. And so finding the ways to create and embed purpose, meaning, and contribution everywhere is a great opportunity for any leader. And you teed that up. And I just wanted to give a little bit more detail on that. So here's the second, maybe the last point of what question I wish you would have asked. Here it is, Roger. Stephen, why is Roger Dean Duncan such a force for good in this world today? Let me give an answer to that. Why is Roger Dean Duncan such a force for good in this world today? And I know that you would never ask such a thing because you're humble. But Roger, first of all, I'm honored to be on your podcast, Leadership. You and I, we have a friendship that goes back 30 years, 30 plus years. We've worked together as partners. I consider you a great collaborator and partner with me on everything I've done on trust. You've literally been my partner on it. But also, you, Roger, you're a model of a growth mindset. Even this, everything that you're doing, you're constantly growing and developing. You're a model of contribution, of giving back, of creating value, of making a difference, a purpose of meaning and contribution. You're modeling that. You're a model of the behavior that we're talking about that builds trust, of character and competence. You go first. You lead out and go first. But also you're a model of my father's last big idea, which he described as this, as living life in crescendo. The idea that your most important work is always ahead of you. And Roger, you've had an extraordinary career, accomplished so much, done so much, and yet you're living life in crescendo. You're not resting upon your laurels and just saying, well, I'm completely retired now. I've done everything. You have. And yet your greatest contributions are still in front of you. Here you are with this Leadership podcast series with extraordinary thought leaders coming on. You're living life in crescendo and demonstrating, modeling this growth mindset, modeling the importance of contribution and making a difference. And so I believe for all of those reasons, that is why Roger Dean Duncan, my friend, is such a force for good in our world today.
Stephen, you are so kind, and I'm doubly glad that we're doing only audio because you've made me blush. So you're very kind. As always, your insights are both interesting and enlightening. Thank you so much for being with us. To learn more about Stephen and his work, go to trustandinspire.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In future episodes, I'll share my exclusive conversations with many more top thought leaders who will offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. I'll be talking with Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Dory Clark, Marshall Goldsmith, Heather Younger, Bill George, Jessica Chin, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. And please leave a comment, even if it's short. That helps promote the show to millions of new listeners. And if there's a smart thought leader out there you'd like for me to interview, just let me know. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.